Welcome to sometimes nature is illegal. When you appreciate versus snark on plants in the wilds. And so this is kind of just like a just for funsies talk of escape. Mainly wanted to do this because we are outside a lot. And sometimes that means you get to see cool things. And if you have seen a lot of plants that you're like, oh, that's cool, I wonder what that is. Here's a quick opportunity to get to know some of the native plant species. And more importantly, when to identify some plants that are not so native and also not so nice to have around. Mainly it's an excuse for me to have drone on about plants for an hour. If you got the condensed version of this last night, I'm really sorry. But yeah, so we're gonna go through some familiar faces you probably see out on NMSAR searches. We're just like, that's cool. Don't have time for that. Quick disclaimer for legal reasons. This LB information in this presentation is a reflection of my own experience and views as both a biologist and ecologist and amateur forager. And this does not represent the thoughts of my employer, NMSAR, or Forest Research Rescue. We will be going over plants that have foraging opportunities. If you choose to do this, please do so responsibly. Check it with somebody. If you send a photo to USDA Forest Service, it will make their day. They love identifying plants. And if you can look at the academic system, there's some people like those in this room that might be able to also look at it. Okay, shut up. So yeah, please be safe when you're foraging, and also please be ethical and responsible when you're foraging. Never take the first thing that you see when you're foraging, and never take the last thing that you see. Leave some for nature's purposes. And further, we'll go over some foraging opportunities that have some medicinal uses. Please keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. We're not going to cure cancer with any of the information presented today. Please don't try. There we go. Oh, how'd that get in there? Huh. That's interesting. This is some really rare pink Windsor diamond depression glass. I think as a set, it retails for about $85, and usually each thing is about $30 to $60, depending on where in the country and how rare it is. You can bid on it at the silent auction for $7 as a starting bid, guys. Okay. Also warning, just take it all the way back. Also warning, this presentation does include mentions of suicide and also images of severe dermatitis. If that's not for you, I'm not going to be offended if you walk out. If that's not for you, I'm not sure what you're doing in SAR. We can talk about it later. But it might not be suitable for all of you. Okay, and I'm not some guy that Spencer just found on the street last year to talk about plants. I have some experience out in nature. I have 2 degrees that say biology, but my research experience and my professional experience is more in ecology, and that's my professional job title these days. And so I work with systems. So I might look at the entire Middle Rio Grande Valley and how invasive plants are affecting water loss conveyances. And so mainly I want to show this to say I'm not a botanist. I'm talking about plants, I'm not a botanist. A botanist is someone who is trained to look at physical characteristics of plants and know, if not down to species, at least family and genus. And they can get in the ballpark. And if you've ever met a botanist, it's amazing. I would watch a game show where we just drop botanists, parts of the world they've never been to, and just watch them identify. Because they can. And it's a superpower that I wish I had. I don't. So I know the plants that I've worked with really well. And we can talk about those ones. If you want to ask me about other questions about other plants, I'll probably say that's a great question. We should look that up together. So how the next hour-ish is gonna go, I'm gonna try to get us out of here quickly, is we're gonna start with some familiar species, native plants that are, some are just all around good, and some are just unfriendly, maybe you need to be wary of them, given the healthy dose of respect, as well as talking about noxious weeds and how noxious weeds get dedicated into different classes at the state level, and how to help out our managers, because the enforcement of noxious weeds does have some SAR implications. So let's start with the native plant. Like, if you watch Bridgerton, the Bridgerton family, it's all good. If you don't watch Bridgerton on Netflix, these memes are not for you. I'm sorry. But, so like the proficient family, these native plants are, and if you saw my presentation last year, my favorite native plants have not changed in the last year, so I'm sorry if this is some review. But starting with buffalo gourd, Cucurbita fetidissima, this is a native plant species that you'll usually see along roadsides, upland areas where it's really flat and dry with a lot of sun exposure. And you can always tell them because they have these really beautiful long leaves that can get over for long that are heart-shaped. And they produce these really large yellow flowers, and they're sprawling on the ground, and when they produce fruit, they have kind of baseball to softball size little brown boards. And so these get more bitter as they age. And a fun fact about buffalo gourd, if you look back through ethnobotanical records and listen to the stories of indigenous folks, is these gourds are really good as a food source and in an emergency as a water source. However, they get more bitter with age. So you're looking, so for some reason you're like, I want to try buffalo gourd, don't, but you can. You want to look for the greenest possible one, the youngest ones.
How do you render the water from it? Is just crack it open and there's water in it, or?
Pretty much, yeah, and I say that like you can use it as a water source in emergencies, and we're not talking emergencies as like you ran out of water on your hike and you're still 2 to 4 miles from your car. That's not the kind of emergency where you want to drink this water. Even if you're finding the youngest fewest gourds to drink, we're talking about you haven't had water for 3 days and you're starting to worry. And you don't want to use this as a primary water source if it is a survival situation. You'll be at a much higher risk of kidney stones than any stone. So, really compound. Stones. And it also stinks really bad. So a lot of people love to hate on buffalo gourd because it's stinky. It's a great pollinator species as well as a great food source for wildlife. Next up is Yerba Mansa. Yerba Mansa is really interesting within the state of New Mexico. So depending on where it grows, it has slightly different properties depending on the mineralogy of the soil that it's growing in. And so you'll always see this one where there's water. So usually if you're by streams or lakes or any kind of very zone, water adjacent, you're going to see it. If you see it where there's no visible surface water around, that means the groundwater is very shallow, like probably about a foot into your feet. And sometimes you can smell this one before you see it, because even if without crushing the leaves, it has a really spicy delicious smell. It's the best way I can describe it. So imagine eucalyptus, but also eucalyptus and like a jalapeno had a pin. It'll smell like Yerba Mansa. But it's a little bit floral. And so this is one of the plants when I moved to New Mexico and I was trying to learn my native plants as I got started here at Tech. In graduate school, this is the one I was talking to my Sapporo neighbors about, like, what are the plants here, like, what do you guys like, what do you guys use for stuff? And there's a lot of locals who use this, and they use it as a cure-all, especially for, they swear by it for cuts and bruises. And this has recently been backed up through some peer-reviewed studies, but it does have some antibacterial activity in it. So if you take some leaves and you make a post with it, you know, I don't know how it measures up against, say, an antibacterial gel, but if you're working with, it's either this or nothing, it is better than nothing. It also smells amazing and you can make really good. I know some folks make tinctures out of the roots. I forget why, but you can, and that's where you have to be careful. Because again, it takes on the properties of the soil mineralogy that is growing in it. So if you are gathering your Yerba Mansa to make tinctures out of, where you boil roots and you boil it down. If you gather it here and kind of anywhere else in the state, you're probably okay. If you're going to make tinctures out of Yerba Mansa that you've gathered around the Taos to Santa Fe area, you might have some hallucinations. And it'll happen while it's boiling if you've read the accounts of people who have tried this. So I would suggest don't. You can buy Yerba Mansa tinctures, but put water drops in your, put drops of it in your water. And allegedly it's very beneficial against I don't know where the peer review stuff is on, I'm using it as a teacher. I tried it, it doesn't taste great. As a tea, it does. Another one that you've definitely seen on some searches is really called gummy. This one's one of my favorites just because the name is really fun to say. The view is Barossa. You just kind of walk across the desert and just like, it sounds like you're muttering Harry Potter's bells. This one has a history of indigenous groups of being used to treat mud boats. And so, and I've tried this a lot, and personally, anecdotally, I do believe that it is way more effective than any over-the-counter bug bite treatments that I've tried. I'm someone who, I get a bug bite, it swells up to this ridiculous sizes and it itches to the point where I can't sleep. So some indigenous knowledge pathways have chewing these little flower heads for a little bit. They're not used to wisdom, but also you can chew them up and then smear the flower head on your butt plate. And it does work, at least in my experience. Unfortunately, there's something about human spit that activates this because I've tried crushing it up with water and it's not the same. Yeah, it's in the aster family. I know that this flower head kind of looks like the thistle, but it's actually an aster. So rattlesnake weed is a really small one that you probably walked over without noticing. They're really small creepers that grow on along the ground. And they really like these dry, sandy surfaces, usually pretty upland. I see them a lot on roadsides. I've tried to transplant this and I can't. It just gives up and dies on me immediately. No matter what I try to do. And it has a history of being used as a as a folk medicine for rattlesnake bites. It is not effective. It is not going to see rattlesnake bites. Most of the venom of most rattlesnakes travel through the lymphatic system. Laying a plant on top of that is not going to do anything. However, it is currently being investigated for a lot of pharmaceutical applications against tuberculosis and as well as human STDs. I forget who's that. So this is in the euphorbia species. So this is the same family as milkweed, which if you've ever plucked off a milkweed leaf, you saw a milky white substance come out. It's not sap, it's a substance called latex. And it's an anti-grazing defense mechanism. So if you're ever confused, if you're dealing with spurge or rattlesnake weed, snap off the leaf. I love it because these white bracts around the flowers are really, it's a really pretty, if you get it to grow in your yard, it's a really pretty ground cover. I've been here for 4 years. I finally have rattlesnake weed in my yard. Oh, what's that? So $84 by itself. It's insane, and it's super rare to find them with the lid because most have broken since these were made in the 30s, okay? I'm just saying, you can go get this and the matching milk saucer for a minimum bid of $7. Very good gift. Okay, so moving on to native plants that are not so friendly. Kind of like certain characters in Bridgerton, just because these plants aren't friendly does not mean they're bad. They're just understood or misunderstood. Also, I have not finished the 3rd season yet. But the first in the unfriendly category is scorpion weed. If you've ever touched it at all, you're probably painfully familiar. It's called scorpion weed because of the structure on its stem, where it curls up like scorpion scale. And if you are unfortunate enough to brush up against the tiny little hairs on its stem or leaves, it stings because it's covered in oils that will make you itch death. And so this specific species up here is Specilia pendulata. There's other species of scorpion weed throughout the state. Allegedly, it's a rare plant. I've seen it, I don't think it's as rare as, powers that be at the New Mexico Rare Plant Council think it is, because I see it quite a lot, including in my front yard. It's also identifiable by the strong onion smell. So yes, it can give you a nasty case of contact dermatitis that will require a lot of soap and water, a lot of.
But it's just an oil,
Yeah, it's
there's no stickers in it.
not that I'm aware of. Yeah, it's just an oil that it has. That, yeah. So the rash and the oils that cause it are similar to those in poison oak. So if you react badly to poison oak, you're probably going to react badly with this. And so if you have any kind of allergies, it can get really bad to the point of like take a day off work. Bad. And so if you do encounter scorpion weed in the wild, fight all of your instincts to scratch it, wash it with soap and water, and then you probably want to treat it with something that will soothe the site of contact, like aloe vera or calamine lotion. And some people, especially those who react badly to poison oak or have allergies, you probably want to consider some diphenhydramine before bed for a week, just so you can get to sleep. And of course, as soon as you get home, take off those clothes, whatever you were wearing, including your shoes and socks, and wash them separately from everything else, and then leave them in the sun to dry. The sun is really good at degrading a lot of stuff. If you've ever bought used furniture, you know this, because you want to leave it in the sun. Unrelated to anxiety. Okay. And one of our most, in my opinion, the most misunderstood and absolutely unnecessarily demonized native plants are our mistletoe species. So in New Mexico, we have two native mistletoe species. They're both in the phorandendron family. One is a broadleaf mistletoe, one is a juniper mistletoe. There. So broadleaf mistletoe, you see in lowland areas, it really likes to parasitize on cottonwood trees. In the southwestern corner of New Mexico, going up the middle Rio Grande Valley, kind of into, and so you can always tell it apart between broadleaf mistletoe and the juniper mistletoe, because broadleaf mistletoe has these very broad leaves, and juniper mistletoe does not. Okay, and so like the phorandendron juniperum, phorandendron macrophyllum is a parasite. So that means these seeds are super stinky, super gluey. So as soon as usually they are transferred by birds eating them, because they have all 22 essential amino acids. So there's a lot of birds that you see that heavily rely on these seeds as a food source, and that goes for many social species. And so as soon as a seed, usually as the bird flies over, it puts out a seed, which lands on a tree, and as that seed sprouts, it grows a razor sharp baby root that saws into the tree, and it saws into the tree circulatory system, specifically the so it siphons off some of the tree's water nutrients that it's getting from the ground. And that is how it feeds itself, not feeds itself, that's how it hydrates itself. But it does its own photosynthesis. The truly parasitic plant species, they don't have them, so they don't need to get chlorophyll. And so I usually see this one on cottonwood trees. There's been 2 instances where I've found it on salt cedar trees. And so if you see this, it's a really beautiful plant, especially like the sage tree with the really beautiful pearlescent berries. It's beautiful, especially because they'll look like this in about December when you're decorating your house for Christmas. You might make the mistake of this will make the most perfect Christmas decoration. Let me bring it inside. Which is not a great idea if you have small kids or dogs, because it can be harmful to the kids. So if you eat some broadleaf mistletoe, specifically, most incidents happen when people, especially children, eat berries. You're going to feel some gastrointestinal distress. You're going to feel drowsy. You're going to have problems moving and forming words. You might have some hallucinations and seizures depending on how many you ate. And so if for some reason someone on your search team or a child in your life eats these berries, it's really important to determine how many did they eat, because if we have someone who ate 5 or less berries, you're probably gonna be fine. I would side-eye them if they were a small child, probably still wanna take them. If they ate somewhere between 6 to 15 berries, they're not gonna have a good time. Moderate to severe cases where they've eaten over 15 berries, these are very rare cases, they do happen. We need to get them into the hospital if they need to have their stomach pumped or charcoal administered something, because they're not clearing that nervous system. I would treat it later, so then you go by weight. So, yeah, so like an 80 pounds, 60 pounds child like Georgia, I would treat it like a 5-year-old child. So, yeah, so if you see Georgia, you can eat more than like 5 berries. Break out, yeah, hydrogen peroxide and make it so. And you can do that by doing like an old ketchup bottle in your car that's empty. Fill with hydrogen peroxide, it will feel like animal abuse, and you just mainline hydrogen peroxide into the cells until they clear up. It's also great to have waste dogs and gum, which will put them into a show. It doesn't feel good, it will save your life. It will be traumatic for both of you. About me, I grew up in a veterinarian. Okay, so there is no anti-serum for eating these berries. So again, if you see a person, and especially a child that's eating them, remove any pieces out of their mouth that are not in their mouth. If you have activated charcoal, definitely give it, especially if you're on your way to the hospital. Especially if they've ingested 15 or more berries and then give fluid. I think I stuck it too. Let the new vitamins. Next up on our unfriendlies list is sacred datura, or datura, right? Yeah, and this is one of my favorite native plants just because it is so odd and so beautiful. And so if you've ever seen it, it forms just like almost waist-high shrub that is flat on the top. And it really absorbs a lot of sunlight, and it creates these large, beautiful white flowers that can get up to 5 inches across. And they bloom them at night, and they do that because it's just more energetically effective to bloom at night. So they don't have to keep that entire flower nice and hydrated in the heat of the day. And it's also helpful because the main pollinator is nocturnal hawk moths. And it's in the morning wood, which is why it probably looks familiar. You haven't seen it on search investigations. However, she is in the unfriendly category for reasons, by being a beautiful native plant that is also a wonderful pollen. All parts of this plant are psychotropic in a bad way, a really bad way, guys. It has a lot of those psychoactive alkaloids and so on. And so if you touch it, when I first moved here, I was trying to collect seeds for this plant because it's a great way that you plant it around your house around your roof. It absorbs a lot of sunlight, so if you're trying to reduce your cooling bill because you're a real grad student, but look into this kind of stuff. But I was trying to collect seeds for this, and all the seed did was just kind of nick me, and I had a hand burning for like 2 days. And so that's just from contact with the seed. It didn't break skin. It just. And so if you ingest any part of it, it can be fatal for people or livestock, which is why it's kind of treated as a nuisance plant by interested farmers. There we go. And so this is an old-timey saying from the Wild West era of New Mexico about how to identify the symptoms of someone who has ingested too much sacred datura. And this might have been because they were using it for ceremonial purposes and just took a little too much. Because there is some indigenous traditions where they ingest parts of this plant for religious reasons. Don't make that make sense. They did. Sorry, I get to make fun of that. And they also know these symptoms because this used to be not a popular way, but not an uncommon way that someone might try to suicide, or they might be trying to chase a high. And so blind is a bad. Use your legend. mad as a hatter, if you don't make any sense, you might be having hallucinations, you're probably having hallucinations. Red as a yeast, your body is perfusing through every vessel. Hot as a hair, again, we lost the ability to regulate. Dry as a bone, parched, thirsty, you're so thirsty. The bowel and the bladder leaves their tone. Yeah, it's not great. And the heart runs alone. So your heart is gonna increase a lot. That's how they used to identify, oh, this person had too much the flour. And so in modern day nomenclature, the symptoms are best described as confusion, hallucinations that lead to really bizarre behavior, hypothermia, they've lost the ability to move and regulate, tachycardia, the heart's going really, really fast. If you take their heart rate, it's going to be way higher than anyone's resting heart rate should be. Photophobia, they don't want to look at light, they're placed in amnesia, they can't really remember what happened, and they're not a reliable subject to telling how much they might have done, especially if they did it for recreational reasons or for unfortunate reasons like suicide and a temporary paralysis. Their nervous system is dangerous. And again, this is another one of those plants, I don't know why I do this now on this slide. This is another one of those plants that's allegedly rare. I've seen it in more counties than this, but then again, I go a lot of kind of out there places, so I don't know if I'm a reliable source of how common or rare it is. But I see it a lot in Sonoma. So if you go to Box Canyon, if you've been, it should be starting to sprout. I don't think it has blooms yet. But if you go into the canyon itself in the wash, there's usually one really beautiful datura that sprouts to right by the first cold red box. So if you have someone who has, for some reason or other, ingested sacred datura, give activated charcoal if you can, have it on you, now's the time, and then take them to a hospital. If you, for some reason, have benzodiazepines, give them. They're agitated. Benzodiazepines will help. If you have oxygen, again, give it. Their system is on the fritz. And hydrate and supervise. Help them flush it out. And so they'll probably be like this for 24 to 48 hours. And this level of treatment needed and exacerbated symptoms can come about by ingesting as little as 15 grams of sacred datura. And so again, if you're dealing with a child, and for some reason they ate the skates, ask them how many. If they say 15 or more, panic. Take it off. Okay, so on to the noxious weeds part. So like these characters in Bridgerton, we'd really just be better off without these kinds of species. But they are here and we do have to deal with them. So there we go. What are noxious weeds? Noxious weeds are broadly defined as just non-native plants, and sometimes in a couple cases, native plants. Usually for a short time, Solana Napoleon was classified as a noxious weed because the ranchers, which is fair. But anyway, so these are any non-native plants that negatively impact either the environment, ecologically, the economy, or pose a threat to humans or livestock. And so not only are they causing some sort of negative impact, but they are also causing negative impact to the extent they are marked for controlled by the state. And so sometimes control measures fail. And so I'm about to show you 4 different lists of noxious species. Tumbleweed isn't on it. That's because they have given us. We'll talk about it. But it is technically a noxious weed, even though it's not a listed species. So there's a lot of confusing nomenclature, especially if you're a landowner. You might have looked into this before, because you can get some state and federal dollars help managing your rangeland for noxious weed species. And so you might have come across these terms, which can be difficult to keep track of. So it runs the spectrum of native and good to non-native and really, really bad. So up at the native and good section, we have native plants. These are plants that have historically have been on this landscape, especially predating the colonial era, where we had European settlers and pioneers. And so if you see a plant described as exotic, all that means is it's not native. That doesn't necessarily mean it's causing any detriment. And so, gosh, what is the common name? Fairy tale plant, foxglove. It's, if you've ever been to the West Coast, you've seen this tall stalked plant that has like really beautiful pink flowers all up and down it. It's not native, but it's also not invasive to noxious. It's an early successional species where it comes in right after forests are cut. It grows, as an overstory comes in, it goes away. So it's not native, but it's not really bothering anyone enough to be called invasive. And the difference between exotic and invasive can be a little bit subjective. And it depends on who you ask, including with myself. So if a plant is invasive, not only is it not native, but it's causing some sort of harm on some level. And when we call weeds noxious, that means that not only are they not native, it's having detrimental effects to the point where the state has gotten involved in market control and state management of then saying, we need a plan to at least manage if not. So, noxious weeds NMSAR. Little bit of a tie-in, little bit of a stretch, but in a long-term 100-foot view, 100-mile view, something to consider. So, what do noxious and invasive weeds do? They move in and they crowd out native species. And those native species are usually further apart. They usually allow for more biodiversity to occur in one place. And they work with the common ecology of the. When invasive species move in, they usually form dense colonies that crowd out everything else. And they die off the wall. So usually they are animals unless they are trees. Then you have a lot of fuel for wildfires, which can be especially dangerous if those invasive species have secondary compounds in them that act as accelerants in terms of fire. If anyone is familiar with Scotch broom, and you've been firefighting on the West Coast, Scotch broom is an ornamental plant from Scotland that they planted. It escaped gardens. It has had millions of dollars of effects in terms of forestry productivity up and down the West Coast. There's a myth in Washington that they hung the guy who first planted it in Washington. Never been verified, but everyone loves to mention it. But you didn't solve the problem, though. That just killed it, man. But wildland firefighters are taught if they are fighting a fire and there's a road going through the fire and one fire is in a stand of trees, that's just a stand of trees. And the fire on the other side of the road is a stand of trees infiltrated with Scotch broom. They have to go to the Scotch broom stand first because it will act as an accelerant and help the fire to jump roads and fire ditches. And that's an extreme example, but there are some similar species in terms of acting as really good wildland fuel. And I don't know if you've been following all of the wildland fires that we have in New Mexico and the shortage of firefighters we are facing as a country. This is important. And controlling noxious weeds is part of controlling the fuel and our natural resources. And so that's, again, really zoomed out implication of noxious weeds and NMSAR. On a practical level, if we're dealing with dense populations of invasive plants, they are going to grow up. They're probably going to reduce your line of sight from search. And they are probably going to have severely open ground available for tracking traps. I don't know if anyone has ever had to do a search through a field of pilchard or tumbleweeds. Was it fun? Did you have a good time? Did the search dogs have a good time? It probably slowed your progress a lot. And so some of these species, on a practical level, on a day-to-day level, are can be hazardous to searchers, to subjects, and to canines. No one wants to see a slug. Specifically, any species with spines, there's a lot of noxious species that are, sorry guys, the word thistles. I mean, invasive thistles are far less friendly than our native thistles, way more thorns. It's not nice. And then poison hemlocks, which is its own really scary can of worms that we talked about. So these are things that we don't want to, we don't want our children to encounter, we don't want our livestock to. And we don't want them obscuring our streets. So, drive from the point, what do you notice about this landscape? This photo was taken down on the Bosque, just south of the Bosque del Apache border, moving west. So this is a field of kochia that has died back since late August, early September, I don't quite remember. So we that's about the photo there, and the rest is kochia, cameras. And so, are there any trackers in here?
Is that a nutmeg?
Oh, yes, this is a very invasive Delta one. Yes, yeah, this was taken during my graduate research, and my dog is not a search dog, but she is a great field dog, and she will carry stuff for food. Anyway, if you are searching this area, do you think you could easily track through all of this kochia that's going to be? I don't know the answer. I'm genuinely asking.
Oh. It depends on how much it's been beaten down.
Yeah.
If it really wasn't beaten down at all, it'd be super easy depending on how heavy the object was. If it was a small child, it'd be kind of probably hard, but if it was a big 250-pound guy, it'd probably be
Maybe easy.
glow in the dark.
And so the beaten down areas are beaten down because there's also cattle. There's feral cattle in this particular spot. Which is why nutmeg is so intensive in that direction. But yeah,
It's cool.
so we do have management prioritizations for different types of weeds. And they go from our highest priority, our class A noxious weeds, down to our watch list species. And so our class A noxious weeds are the weeds that, and this is determined at the state level. So noxious weeds in New Mexico will be different from noxious weed priorities in Arizona versus Colorado. And so class A noxious weeds, these are our highest priority noxious weeds. These are weeds that are either not currently present in the state or present in such small discrete amounts where complete eradication is possible. And that is always the goal. But given the limited funding that these organizations are working with, it's a very lofty goal. Class B noxious weeds are limited to discrete areas of the state. So like maybe there's populations documented in only one area. And they're like, okay, if we can get to this population, we can make sure that like it's not spreading. We can reduce the source population. So in class B noxious weeds, they're trying to stop it from spreading. If it's class C, it's widespread throughout the state, and the state says, we're busy, and they hand it off to either whatever county it's in or your local weed management area, which is usually sometimes the oh gosh, the water irrigation district. But at class C, essentially, we've given up, and so this is where tumbleweed and oh gosh, I'm sorry guys, I'm not remembering things today. Tumbleweed and other really prevalent species are part of the class C. It's like there's on the local level, there might be some management efforts, but if you talk to people at the state level, there's no source populations to manage anymore. The source populations are right next to all of the other populations. And then we have our watch list species. And these are species that are absolutely not in the state yet, but they might be in areas close to the state, or they might be garden species that have proven to be really prone to the sleeping gardens in similar kinds of habitat. So we are not going to go through all of these individually because it's a lot of species. And so this is just a few of them. So Scotch thistle is one of these thistles where it's really unpleasant to come into contact with. And if you're going through a field of them with a search dog, you want to put shoes on your search dog. And we all know how much dogs love wearing shoes. Same for yellow star thistle. Same purple star thistle. Scentless chamomile is one that loves to grow in like super dense populations where you're not going to be able to do a good hasty search through that here. It's going to obscure your vision of the ground. And it's going to obscure your line of sight. So. There. So one example of a classically noxious weed that we still have a really good chance of controlling to the point of eradication in the state, in my opinion, is Ravenna grass. And so if you look up Ravenna grass, you're going to see two different Latin names pop up. The botanists are fighting. We'll see the results in 5 years. If you want to follow some really fun written fights, subscribe to a botanical journal. They just, or their Facebook group. They do it there too. It's a good time. So I believe the more recent one that they're calling it now is the Pidian Ravenna. In my guidebooks, I have Saccharine Ravenna. But either form is Ravenna grass. And this is a grass that's native to the Mediterranean, and it was sold in the US as like this whole party ornamental. So if you look at it, you'll probably go, that looks like pampas grass. It does. There's a reason for that. It's a good ornamental, except it escapes the landscape. There is, for some reason, New Mexico, specifically New Mexico, has this myth that it's in the Southwest because it's escaped the Albuquerque Sioux elephant enclosure. That has never been substantiated. It's a great story. I love it. Not true. As far as anything that I can find. But yeah, so far we see it in 5 counties. And I just did river surveys up from Albuquerque down to the Isleta line, and then from Sapporo down to San Antonio. And in the fall, I was doing more river surveys further out. We have found it as far south as these consequences. We have some on the eastern side of the Rio Grande. We are working on it. Especially because, again, it's pretty, if you know your grasses, it's pretty easy to identify. It's pretty easy to just yank out. It does have some rhizomes. So if you yank it out, you're probably not going to eradicate that one individual. You will give it a hard time. But it really only reproduces by seeds. And it produces a lot of seeds that can persist for about 100 years, if I remember correctly. But it has these rhizomes, which are, it can reproduce asexually through like budding. It'll grow out a root and shoot up a baby sprout at the end of it. And so they don't really use the rhizomes to colonize new populations. They just use those to build up current populations. And so, again, you look at it and you're like, that looks like pampas grass. It does. They're both on the noxious weeds. So the way to tell them apart and you're confused is just go and try to give it a hug. Get a lot of little paper cuts. That's pampas grass. And it feels just like hugging some sticks. That's Ravenna grass. Okay, and then finally, one of the noxious weeds that truly scares me as someone who works in the field on a regular basis is poison hemlock. And so this is an old map. This is the most current map that I can find. I'm just assuming, just based on the fact that this map is 10 years old, that this distribution is correct. I hope I'm wrong, but I have not found any evidence to the contrary. This is a carrot family, which is why it kind of looks like carrots. If you look at the leaves. And it's native to Eurasia and especially in Africa. And it can grow to 3 to 8 feet tall. And again, this is another prolific seed producer. Like each plant will produce 30,000. So again, they can persist. If you work with a lot of invasive plants, they have some common traits. They produce a lot of seeds. Those seeds persist for a long time and build up a very long-lived seed bank even after you get that weeded all the time. And so, does anyone here like Queen Anne's lace? Yeah, it's my mom's favorite flower. She loves to pick it on the side of the road, and that terrifies
That's
me.
a little purple dot, right?
Yeah, and so it looks like a lot like Queen Anne's lace. And if you're ever confused, if you're my mother trying to pick flowers on the side of the road, please just remember the queen has hairy lips. Queen Anne's lace, the stem is just furry. It's got these little hairs on it. On poison hemlock, one, it has a smooth stem with no hairs, and at the base of the stem, you get this purple mottle. And that is the best way to confirm that, like, oh, you're dealing with poison hemlock. And so all parts of it are toxic. However, especially in the seeds, the lower stem and the roots is where you see the most bits of it. And so It's not a good time if you adjust it. If you adjust it, it probably lights up. If the market tested, you do paralysis, coma, death, and as soon as Tuesday. There have been cases of people who are again are very sensitive to pillows and walk past this and just like maybe they accidentally break a stem and they go too close to it and they have some of these effects. I think there was a really high-profile case in Indiana a couple years ago where I was in a coma for 2 weeks after like he was just bushwhacking in his car. And just like the act of like he was flipping around the base. Perspired some I would put it in the morning. And so you need treatment within 3 hours. So this is why this scares me as an outdoor professional. He works outdoors a lot. About to do more. So again, if you love clean as ice cooking on the side of the road, please look to make sure that it's not a smooth stem. It doesn't have purple modeling, as well as voice and hemlock stinks. I just went with the description of stinky urine odor, there's been some very specific descriptions of what kind of urine this smells like. And the internet seems to be, not just the internet, but like the weed management people seem to be in a disagreement that it smells like cat urine or mouse urine, and I don't know why they know what those two smell like so well. Yeah, this is one where don't let your dog eat it, don't let your kid touch it. And if you are removing plants on your own property, put on some PPE if you think that's what you have. This is the respirator situation. Yeah.
Is it? Common period will be.
So far, so it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty prevalent, like throughout, the US, the Eastern Seaboard, it's making its way west. It's just looking like Montana.
So as far as, you have a climate zone, just.
It does great in all of them, so. Yeah, it's really easy to hate on these plants because like, oh, they're evil, they're bad. And like, yes, they're doing some bad things. Really wrecking up our where we love to work and play. But also we kind of have to admire like this guy is really well adapted to live everywhere. Like he won evolution. Unfortunately for us. But the seeds are also really toxic to the dust to touch, so he's a protein option. That's why we can swim in with like 5. There we go. So here are some class B, here are all of the class B noxious weeds. Again, we have thistles, multi-star thistle, gold thistle. We have poison hemlock, which is very closely related to. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, guys. I labeled that wrong. This is a class B noxious weed. Just kidding. Which is not great for us. But again, spiny cockleburr is another one, and spinosum, where it's really prevalent in the south. Really, the folks from Las Cruces area have told me that they've seen this a lot. I've only ever seen one, and I was in the middle of nowhere in the city. Teasel is another thistle species that just looks like a thistle that really drunk one night. Then chicory, I know some people who really love to plant chicory in their gardens because it's so edible. That's great. I love it. Please put it inside in a pot. Don't put it outside in your garden. That's this really one down here, which it is beautiful. I love seeing it on the side of the road. It is very handy to have the practices. And so a second example, I guess, of what must be not just weeds, depending on type of weed. And so this one is in the mustard family. And it's another one from Eurasia. And you see it at upland sites, but I've also seen it right along the Rio Grande or irrigation ditches. So it's kind of a general species, but it can live anywhere. And we'll move it to 2 to 4 feet high. And when it's not blooming, it can be confused with a royal. Anyone's if it is blooming, these white flowers bloom. But it also spreads mainly through seeds, and then it maintains its populations via spreading through stands. So one population of perennial population will expand in all directions about 10 feet a year, and it will send its seeds downstream on. And so this is the most current distribution that I could find of perennial. And we didn't think that it was as abundant in the south as it now is. So that's something that I was able to verify working in Sephora on Rivers Place. Okay, our class 2 noxious weeds. These are our cheatgrasses, these are our aquatic milfoils, and our green weeds. I'm sure everyone's familiar with earth feather.
It's a mission.
What's that?
So that's the mission.
Wait, there's a mission in Albuquerque?
Yeah. It's our office.
Cool.
Fallen climber.
That's very, again, more thistles, but also some more familiar faces like Russian nappies, which is a very fine thistle, as well as Russian olive, salt cedar, Siberian elm, and tree of heaven. And these guys are. And managing these has been left to a county or irrigation district level. So if you don't like how your county is managing or removing these species, call them. Especially if you're like, if you want to give them access to your property to remove them, they might be down. It is expensive to remove salt cedar, which
How effectively can you remove salt cedar?
let's talk about it. So, salt cedar is a really ancient tree species that is native to the Eastern Mediterranean. And it came over here in the 1800s as a living tree around farms and ranches. It is really well adapted to this climate. It's in Mexico, very similar to the climate of the Middle East. The Near East. It wreaks havoc on our soils, which is why it's so hard to really get rid of. Because even if you just go and manually remove all of the above ground biomass of a salt cedar stand, has anyone does this? Everyone had the pleasure.
Trying to keep that all back through.
What happened? It just came back, and nothing else grew in there while it was coming back, did it? And this is because how Tamarisk deals with excess salt content in the water, which we have really salty water down here, especially in this part of the Rio Grande, versus groundwater that is saltier than the ocean around here. Especially at that well I showed you of my dog in the water monitoring equipment. So how it deals with excess salts in its groundwater is it just doesn't. It exudates the salts onto its leaves, and that serves two purposes. It gets rid of excess salt out of its system, and those salt crystals compile themselves on top of the tamarisk leaves, and they help refract and reflect away excess sunlight, so it's even more drought tolerant. But then, even though it's technically an evergreen tree, every once in a while, they still drop their leaves every once in a while. And over time, that salty leaf litter buildup fundamentally changes the soil content. It changes what microbes can live there and other things. And so there's a word from plants that do essentially biological warfare to make sure other plants don't grow nearby. And so those plants will literally produce their own chemical compounds to discourage other plants. The term is allelopathic. Salt cedar is not technically allelopathic, but the way that it manages its salt and the way it makes the soil salty or active, it essentially functions. And so there's been some hysteria in New Mexico about how much water tamarisk is. And this is because in the 80s, one guy did one study with one tree and one plastic bag one time. Allegedly, he published his results. He never described his limits. That number was in the thousands of gallons of water used per day, and it was astronomical. And no one has ever been able to replicate that number since. And so it does not use as much water as you might see ranchers. And like, just because that's not true does not mean you should not manage your salt cedar. It uses about the same amount of water as cottonwood does per day, about 127 liters of water per day. And that was from a study in 2015, Nagler et al. And she works at the Bureau And that study was her replicating her own results from 2014, 2012, 2011, 2009. So this is a really reliable number. And so I've heard a lot of ranchers complain about cottonwood using as much water as tamarisk. They all need to go because they use so much water. And that's true. They use about the same amount of water. It's not that much. But when you think about the density of cottonwoods in a nice, beautiful native cottonwood gallery, you can like play fetch in it. You can practice baseball or to catch. I don't know words. You can play fetch with your dog, essentially. You can play a game of like fun hide and seek. Where you can still like see your child or your friends like further down the path of the cottonwood gallery. Because in a cottonwood gallery, there's about 2.5 cottonwood trees every 30 square meters. And so using about 127 meters. And they're so large and they need so much canopy space, they kind of self-limit how densely they can grow. In 30 square meters of a mature tamarisk stand, you have about 14 tamarisk trees per day. And these are numbers that I found in my own thesis here at Tech and the numbers that I've seen elsewhere while I was doing my research. And so the problem isn't that one uses more water than the other, they're similar. But the problem is tamarisks grow so densely together. This is a bad picture. He's a lone wolf, but that they use an inordinate amount more water per square foot. But people still like them sometimes because they're pretty, and that's true, unfortunately. I'm a really big fan of supporting artisans who carve with tamarisk wood or sell firewood of tamarisk wood. After it's helped. Then we have a watch list species. These are species that again, they're not really here yet, but it looks like they probably will be if their populations in surrounding areas. And I'm not really too familiar with any of these. Yellow bluestem, we have found in the States. I'm doing a lot of surveys for the DOT in the States. This past summer, we were up by Gallup and Albuquerque and Harris and some of the little trees in the Gila area. We found yellow bluestem. So that one's here. This watch list species is already out here. And there's a lot of colleagues of mine who would argue that also needs on the watch list is some current ornamental plants that probably should no longer be sold as that includes Russian sage. If they're starting to escape the gardens, right now that's the anecdotal stage. Some colleagues and myself are trying to bother the counties that we see this happening, or this DOT, or whoever's land we see this happening, as well as Spanish broom, which is a close cousin to Scotch broom. A lot of similar properties, except it's from Spain. It's really well adapted to dry, sunny, warm places like New Mexico. And I would bet money that, and I would bet money that in about 10 to 20 years, we're going to see Scotch broom is steep. So people love to plant it. It does so well as an ornamental plant. Talk to me about your ornamental plants. Please plant something native stuff. Because there's a lot of really green native plants that have yellow flowers. I think that's all of the other, not unofficial watch lists. Okay, so how do we combat noxious weeds? We cannot challenge them to a dual enablement. So the first step is to know what's a noxious weed. You can't help your county managers know what noxious weeds there are unless you know what you're looking at. And if you don't know, you don't have friends that know plants, a plant ID app is a good place to start, but please use it as that spread. Ideally, email pictures to USDA or for Forest Service folks. Again, they will love to talk to you about your plants and what you're seeing. They love that. That is the best part of their job. Make sure you have a lot of time. If you ask a botanist about a plant, you'll receive a full taxonomy lesson. Will be invigorating. Yes. So there are native plant societies across New Mexico that go on plant hikes. I've seen a lot of them on Facebook, and so you can join those and try to join on those hikes if you want to. Going for walks with people who know their plants and point things out to you is the best way to learn, of course. If you don't have that, or don't want 30-minute lectures every time you ask one question about one plant you saw one time, an app is a great place to start. And I really like PlantNet. I don't like apps. I have at least 7 different books about grasses alone at home that I take with me into the fields, along with a hand lens and the magnifying glass, and sometimes a colleague's field microscope. And so I identify plants by, I think it's this, I pull open the taxonomic. Thank you. I pull open my identification key and I go through it. That takes a lot of time. Your time is valuable. I get paid to do that. I don't do that in my free time. I don't think you should do that in your free time either. Plant ID apps are a great place to start. I really like this one because not only can you snap a picture of it and go like, what is this? It's AI. It sounds like it's pretty good. I've had mostly good luck. And not only will AI give you what it thinks it is, but then it immediately gets posted to like a social group within that app, so other people can verify, like, oh, that AI ID is correct or not. And that helps train the AI even more, which is super helpful. And the data is publicly available, so researchers all over the world coming to this database that we created on this app to track biodiversity and especially invasive plant encroachment. And so, yes, there's a lot of reviews for this. It's not the most highest graded one, but in terms of learning your plants and being part of invasive plant tracking, no matter where you are, I like it the most. And they especially want people to use their app in the wild. Like, yes, you can use it on your house plants. You can use it when you're plant shopping, and that's awesome. Do it. Especially if you're trying to learn your plants. It's a great place to be. It's a controlled environment. There's so much nearby page to know what those plants are. Grocery store. But I really want you to use this app, and that's what it's most designed to do. Because I'm recommending this one because unfortunately, New Mexico does not have a citizen science not for weed app, and I was kind of shocked to see that. So most states do these days because it helps inventory these weeds, so we know what we have and where they are and how bad it is. But with I'm so sorry, with an app like PlantNet, you can still, it's a dedicated place to record and document with coordinates what you're seeing, where it is, what it looks like, what you think it is. And then you can call your management lead area and say, I found this, and this is where it is. And they might wave you off, but they also might say, give us the coordinates. You're doing surveys on them right now. And they probably are.
And does plant.net record all that stuff?
Yes.
So I thought that's what you-
Which is why they want you to use it in the wild for most. They want that to be a reference. So, I'm not. And so, what New Mexico has is this one very specific sheet of paper. No internet.
Sorry, I didn't bother with that.
That's okay. Okay, well, I'm going to make sure that these slides are available. I think I have to do that anyway as a presenter. I encourage you to go to that and what that. Okay. Those all 2 steps, yes. Okay. And so I really encourage you to either take a picture of this link or find my slides later on after we get published through NMSAR and look at it. And all it really is the number for your weed management area, which is for most people, they're counting. And it has a phone number at the very least. I think some of them have websites. And so that is like the place to start of, I'm finding this. Because again, please keep in mind, this isn't just bad for search and rescue operations, this is bad for our forestry operations. Because not only is it a forest fire hazard, it also means less productive forests. And like many states, our forests don't work with forests, and timber sales on them help fund our schools and roads and other as well as just our general ecology. We're using species part of it as a habitat loss. The plants are habitat. Birds preferentially live in very specific types of trees or bushes. And some of these noxious trees that I just went over are just places of species. Don't talk to the bird people about the willow thrush. They have unreasonable opinions. They think that we should just keep all of the invasive trees. Don't listen to them, please. They're wrong. Their heart is in the right place. They're a little confused. So with that, do we have any questions?
I have,
Yeah.
sorry. So lived here 12 years and I've heard, tales of creosote bush and mesquite being non-native species.
I'm not aware. I've heard the others too. So these are two species that are kind of considered, are native. They're considered noxious because of how they grow and they like to disturb areas. And so especially ranchers will complain about creosote, they'll call it invasive and like it's acting like an invasive because it's coming in to do raided habitat. And overtaking the areas where they want to graze the cattle or grassland, because it's been overgrazed for the last 150 years, creosote is moving in. It's a disturbance loving species. But yeah, it's native, it's just acting like
It was a self-caused fire. Yeah, that sounds like, humans are noxious.
It's noxious feedback. And so Bureau of Land Management has actually contracted with University of New Mexico to experiment with a creosote herbicide that's actually being tested out by the power lines up to Global, which being box standing. And so I got to be part of a piece of that study while I was here at Tech. And what we're finding is creosote is very hard to kill, but also the herbicide is showing promise of truly being only targeting creosote. And that was the piece of the puzzle that I was working on. It's like, are we seeing effects in other plants besides creosote? What we did see is the creosote did not die. It died, it took a nap for 2 years, now it's off the back. And so creosote is infamously very hard to kill because it has this amazing root system. It can either, if there's a lot of good soil moisture available in like a shallow slope, it'll just hang out there with its roots. If there's not enough groundwater there, it'll just grow down into like farms. And so it has this two-tiered root system that is like both the taproot and the fibrous root, which makes it invincible. It is a native plant though. It's a great pollinator species. But yeah, not great if you're a rancher and you are losing your grazing lands. A disturbance. It also means you need to rotate your grazing habits. Yeah, good question.
So where do we, like, I'm trying to rebuild my front yard. I live in Albuquerque, right off the river, basically. And where do we find, like, it's hard for me in Albuquerque to find native plants to find. So like,
Yeah,
where do you,
so I've had a lot of good luck at a school nursery.
okay,
If you're comfortable doing stuff, please don't dig them up. Unless it's a very, very successful native plant. But if you're comfortable trying to propagate cuttings, you can try. And so if you put in a cutting of any sort of willow species, a true willow species, it has to have salix in the Latin name. They create their own growth. And so they will help you propagate whatever you want. So far I've had success with it. I've not managed to plant that willow could not.
that's,
So yeah, Osuna Nursery is really good. I think there's one in Berlin as well. Yeah.
You thought about having, well, they're not necessarily invasive or anything, but the really nasty things in terms of prickly seeds that stick all over dogs' coats.
Okay, so we didn't cover goat heads. And so goat heads are invasive, they're found, but they're terrible. I don't know what they're invasive. It's some noxious those, which makes me scared that they are. But there's another spiky seed plant with yellow flowers that's native. It's the one that grows up. Goat head plants, those grow out. The ones that grow up, that's the one that's potato.
Most of these veggies, yeah, I just thought about, I mean, it grows in wet places, so more in the mountains, but.
Okay, that's why.
It's, I think it's beautiful, but then it has these really nasty, but they look like ticks and all that.
Yeah.
They really stick into things and they hurt. And so if you ever get into one, so, and they have tons of students.
Don't know anything about them, but it is my theory that like most plants in New Mexico are trying to kill you, which is to manage society.
yeah.
Which is part of why I made this piece. Like there's been some surgeries where I've been on like, We'll see the woodland flower is really pretty and you just wanna touch these little spiky seed balls. It's like, the guys don't, we don't have time for those hallucinations. So if you really don't like someone, tell them to touch a moonflower seed pod with their fingers.
Go ahead, I saw one growing in the driveway, crack with a white rock, and I grabbed it, and pulled it up and it's for my hands.
Yeah. I think most people that have eradicated goat heads out of their yard do some of the flamethrower, which just sounds really cathartic. But, yeah, Right. what? You can borrow them from someone.
We burn it.
I borrow them all this. All right, you wanna go see what's up with that search or go to track it? Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
guys. I'm sorry if you did not get the recognition record, this,